good evening, good morning, depends on where you are. I'm Chef Suvir Saran. I've lived in New York for 30 plus years, moved to India 6 years ago. I've spent 52 years on this planet. I love to eat, I love to cook, I love to share stories. So you see me all dressed up. This is not how I dress up and sit at home. This is India for you. ये हिंदुस्तान की कहानी है, ये एक कल्चर की कहानी है. It's a story of a people, a country, and cultures within it. And that's why I thought I'll dress up. I'm wearing a Rohit Bal kurta. He passed away a few months ago. He was one of my closest friends. He died in my arms, if you will. And I've known him since I was 14. What brought us together was food. So today's purpose is to help you write a cookbook, to teach you how to be a cookbook author, a storyteller, a person who feeds people's minds, bodies, and souls. And that's the what my goal here. But more than that, I want to introduce you to the purpose behind a cookbook. A cookbook is not just what you pannas that you put next to a stove and cook up a dish. It's supposed to conjure up memories. It's supposed to give you comfort. It's supposed to make you feel excited about being at the stove. It's about making you feel connected to the world that you've left behind if you're living far from your family and friends. It's all about giving people something to eat, but also to nourish their minds and souls. That's the purpose of a cookbook. How can one approach the idea of writing a cookbook? You do it, because you have that thought in your head. When I was in New York in 1993, I was 20-year-old. I arrived to learn graphic design and art history. I used to wear everyday clothes. I wasn't dressed up like this. But in my head, I missed Hindustan. I missed that India where foods from different communities, foods from different regions, foods from different families, different religions, different sects, all came to the table in different homes. And when we ate it, we realized we were part of a collective. बिखरे बिखरे तारे हैं हम लेकिन झिलमिल एक है हम सब भारतीय हैं. When I arrived in New York, I wanted to bring the story of all of India. हंसते गाते हिंदुस्तानी लोग अलग अलग रंगों के अलग भाषाओं से बोलते हुए, people who spoke different languages, who cooked and ate different foods, but called themselves Indian. I miss that food. I miss that ethos. I miss that sensibility. And what did I do? I felt homesick. I was hungry to eat, but I was hungry for my watan, my land. How could I fill that hunger? I had to start teaching myself how to cook. I bought cookbooks by famous authors who we've all celebrated, who we've all loved, who we've all respected and regarded. But their cookbooks failed me. On the pages were foods that looked yummy, but the recipe, when I worked it exactly to rote, every ingredient correct, all the chopping and mise en place done correct, the food I cooked didn't match that photograph. कहीं पे वो लोग भूल गए थे कि एक किताब को लिखना, they forgot that in writing a cookbook, we have to not just share a recipe, we have to make people successful. So the biggest challenge and purpose behind a cookbook is to not just write a cookbook, equip people like me when I was 20 to cook, to share with pride, with success. If I cook correctly and feed somebody a delicious dish, what happens is they invite friends, they feed them, they get congratulated, they get celebrated. They even maybe get a job as a caterer like I did, and then they become chefs like I did. I studied art, I became a retailer, I was helping design stuff, and all of a sudden I started cooking because I was cooking delicious foods that Indians and non-Indians loved. And they said this bacha who's 20-year-old, 21-year-old, 23-year-old, 24-year-old living in New York City was giving people the best Indian food anywhere. And how did it happen? My mother gave me recipes. Pandit ji, our family's Brahmin chef, he gave me recipes. And they taught me that a recipe is a link to our past. A recipe is the enjoyment in our present. And a recipe is the future of our people's continuation of the arc of our family, our nation, our people, our culture, and the world. So in the weight, in the gravitas, in the bhar and the vazan of a recipe lies the mystery of a society, the layers of a society, and the language, culinary language of a people. When you do it justice, you're not just cooking food, you're documenting a nation's heritage, a nation's culture, a nation's food history, lore, and legend. So when you come to the idea of writing a cookbook, be smart, be hardworking, and make sure you're not just cooking flippant food. साधारण चीजें मत cook कीजिए, simple चीजें जरूर cook कीजिए, but don't make them simplistic. The difference between simple and simplistic, one word, two versions of it. Simple is magic, कि बहुत कम में आपने बहुत जादू दिखा दिया. Simplistic वो होता है जो आपने बहुत ज्यादा भी करा हो, पर इतनी बेवकूफियों के साथ किया है कि वो जब बन भी जाए उसमें कुछ मजा नहीं आता. तो आपकी किताब, आपकी recipes, your stories, your recipes, your book have to stand the test of time. So the purpose of a cookbook is to write recipes that share your perspective, that work at this kitchen stove, that are celebrated at the table by people eating it and wanting more and more of that dish. And most importantly, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 years later, people want that book of recipes because they say, wow, those recipes work. They are connected to a story. They're of for people who are hungry for good flavors, and they're perennial, they are classic. So that's the purpose behind writing a cookbook. So this is why you write a cookbook. How can one approach writing a cookbook? You can approach it in many ways. You may want to write a cookbook that's vegetarian. You may want to write a cookbook that's non-vegetarian. You may want to write a cookbook that's for all people. You may want to be very specific and write a vegan cookbook. You may want to write a carnivorous cookbook, or just 1, 2, or 3 ingredients. So वो आपके ऊपर है, cooking for 5, cooking in 5 ingredients, cooking in 5 minutes or 15 or hours. So that is the premise behind how you approach it. But you must approach it with judicious care. It's not a mazak, it's not a joke. It is a serious task that requires a lot of thought, a lot of care, and most of all, discipline, a rigor. You come to it with an academic approach. आप उसको एक गुरु की तरह देखें कि एक गुरु अपने शिष्य को कैसे सिखाता है. वो उनको पहले सोच उनकी चौड़ी करते हैं. They widen the horizons of their students' mind. Then they teach them the art of coming back again and again to the same things and understanding the fugitive details, the little bits that make a recipe successful. Oftentimes when you're writing a recipe, you've written कि ये सब करना है, ये सारा इसमें इतने ingredients हैं, इसमें इतने steps हैं, वो आपने लिख दिए. It's not enough to just write the steps or the ingredients of a recipe. You have to teach in a visual painting with words. You have to tell your audience, आपको लोगों को एक चित्रकार की तरह but अल्फाजों में, लफ्ज में सिखाना है कि जब वो भून रहे हैं किसी चीज को, कितने मिनट भूनना है, और वो जो प्याज आप भून रहे हैं वो क्या ब्राउन रंग की हो रही है, उससे क्या थोड़ा तेल ऊपर आ रहा है, क्या वो चिपक रही है बेस पे, क्या पानी छिटक के वो साफ होगा उसका बेस बर्तन का. You have to tell people when you're browning an onion, you're not just browning for 15 minutes, but you're cooking them till they're caramelized. How dark are you taking the caramel? Light brown, dark brown, almost black, sizzling and crisp with ashen white on it. What are you doing? So those visual clues in words are an essential part of the art of recipe writing. Then you have to talk about any scents that may be coming in. फिर आपको ये भी बताना है कि उसमें कोई खुशबू आ रही है पैन में, वो देखें आप, समझें, उसके ऊपर ज़हन कीजिए. So you have to understand the writing of a recipe book, the instructions, the emotions behind a recipe all have to be communicated. I always begin with a head note. Every recipe of mine comes with a head note, जिस कहानी एक feature मैं कहता हूँ, अगर मैं if I'm saying my mother's donuts, I have a recipe called my mom's donuts in, I believe it was American Masala, my second cookbook. So I'm writing my mom's donuts, but I told them what it was. When I was 6 and 7 and 8-year-old living in Nagpur, a small town in India, in Maharashtra, we had left our home in Delhi, the comforts of my dadi's kitchen, where Panditji, our Brahmin cook, cooked us amazing food. अब मम्मी कुक कर रही थी मेरी अम्मी, तो वो डोनट्स बनाती थी. वो डोनट्स इतने बेहतरीन थे कि आज भी जब मैं almost 45 years later जब मुझे उनकी याद आती मेरा मुंह गीला हो जाता है. I want them. वो रेसिपी ऐसी रेसिपी है जो स्टीवन डर्फी, who was the pastry chef of the French Laundry, the greatest American restaurant, made it in his kitchen. उसको मेरी अम्मी के डोनट्स अच्छे लगे. पर उसने क्यों बनाए वो डोनट्स? क्योंकि रेसिपी में एक कहानी दे गई कि मैं जब बच्चा था, when I was a 5-year-old, I wrote in the recipe, mom would make them with the cover of a jam bottle, she would cut the shapes. With the cover of a ketchup bottle, she would cut the center hole. ये भी मैंने लिखा. तो लोग अब उससे connect होते हैं. People connect to the stories, they relate to them. A recipe has to be relatable. तो head note पे मैंने ये दे दिया. तो फिर रेसिपी लिखी, इतना ग्राम चीनी, इतना ग्राम आटा, इतना ग्राम बटर, इतना ग्राम दही, वो सब लिख दिया. इंस्ट्रक्शंस दे दिए कि इसको नीट कीजिए, गूंद के रखिए, रोल कीजिए, उनको काटिए, जैम के ढक्कन से छोटा होल, केचप के ढक्कन से बनाए. एंड footnote was what alterations you can make to the recipe, क्या adjustments आप बना सकते हैं, क्या नहीं. तो ये एक मैंने रेसिपी कंप्लीट उन लोगों को दी. तो ये रेसिपी एक रेसिपी लिखने का तरीका है. You may want to add a photograph. Of course you must. A photograph is a key today, because a lot of us in the world of Instagram, in the world of YouTube, everything is given like this. Gyan is free, Gyan is everywhere, and it's not always good. The first way you can, we eat with our eyes. हम अपनी आंखों से पहले खाते हैं और अपनी आंखों से पहले किसी चीज को पढ़ते हैं. So you must add photographs, because we eat and read with our eyes before we do any other way. So take a good photograph, click it. When you're taking a photograph, you must remember it's not enough to take a photograph of a donut. वो ही donut जिसकी आप रेसिपी दे रहे हैं उसकी फोटो लीजिए. And अगर steps की देनी है फिर वो rhythm कीजिए, that every recipe then should share the steps of the photographs. But it must be honest, it must be true, it must be real. क्योंकि अगर आपकी फोटोग्राफ और जो आदमी घर पे और औरत घर पे बना रहे हैं, अगर वो मैच नहीं की तो लोग आपको थप्पड़ मारेंगे, आपकी किताब बिकेगी नहीं. They'll shame you, they'll embarrass you, they'll go on Instagram and YouTube and badmouth you. So make sure your photographs are correct, they're real, and they match the recipe you've shared. That's the next essential thing. Then there has to be an index in the book. The index is the last pages of the book where you've written the names of every recipe. Organize it alphabetically by the names, also perhaps by appetizers, salads, main courses, soups, so that desserts. So when people are reading the back pages, they know किस recipe को कहाँ ढूंढ सकते हैं. Sometimes people also put ingredients and list it like that. That's very labor intensive, but it makes people very comfortable in looking at a book. The next thing is what I've always added in my books, a list of stores, a list of shops and markets where I go to find special ingredients, where I go to buy pots and pans, where I go to buy tools, where I find special, flours, where grains. It's a great gift you give people to have them equip their pantry, their larder, their kitchens with all the tools, all the ingredients, all the necessary equipment that makes a cookbook and a kitchen come alive. So make sure you do that for them. The other thing is your book's chapters. How do you want to formulate your book? Is it about chapters by kind of food you're cooking? It's vegetarian. So within the vegetarian cookbook, there are starters, there are salads, there are soups, there are stews, there are one-pot dishes, there are side dishes, there are vegetarian main courses, there are vegan main courses. Then you can do desserts. So you can do it like that. If you're cooking, if you're writing a book with recipes of all kinds of food, what I would suggest is again same: starters, soups, salads, main courses, side dishes, grilled dishes. Maybe you do a poultry chapter, you do a meat chapter, you do a seafood chapter, you do a chapter on desserts. This is how you can classify your chapters. Again, the index will be the same, and you sort it out in the end with all the resources you want to give to people. So this is how you can make the chapters of your cookbook. Some people go into introductions to the chapters. I did when I talked about appetizers. I talked about all the nashta that the Indians give. हम लोग नाश्ता हम लोग कितनी बारी दिन में कर सकते हैं. जब कोई घर पे आता है हम लोग उनको खाना खिलाते हैं, उसको हम क्या कहते हैं? नाश्ता, snacks. तो उसके बारे में लिखिए, the kahani of it, because your cookbook will sell more when people relate to it. कि मेरे घर पे समोसे ऐसे बनते थे, उस दुकान से आते थे, उसके समोसे की रेसिपी मैंने आपके साथ शेयर करी है. That in my home, when people came unannounced, my mother would have samosas ready. Perhaps she had made them that morning, or she had frozen them and put them in her freezer, and she would fry them last minute. You can share these details. You can talk about the elaborate snacks that your family had and why they are still in your head as memories, why you want to share them in your cookbook. That introduction to a chapter is your moment to give people that gyan, that gift, that knowledge, which will make them excited because they'll start thinking in their head about what their family did. So that's the content of a book. The next thing I've written is the importance of finding a niche for a cookbook. So we've covered this by saying that, I can have a vegan cookbook, a vegetarian cookbook, a seafood cookbook, but there are many other niches. You can have a Gujarati cookbook. You have a Gujarati cookbook of the Bora Muslim community. क्या बेहतरीन खाना है बोरा लोगों का. They travel the world. वो दुनिया भर घूमे as traders and they brought back to India spices from everywhere. Their masalas are magical. Their meats are better than any I've eaten. Their vegetarian dishes, oof, क्या उनका स्वाद है, जायका है, आप लोग इमेजिन ही नहीं कर सकते. अगर कोई सुन रहा है जो बोरा कम्युनिटी के, प्लीज एक किताब लिखिए. So when you're finding a niche, you can do a cookbook from Gujarat. There were traders who came to India laden with spices and exotic ingredients and made vegetarian dishes, meats, amazing patti samosas that was so incredible. Their spice powders were incredible. That's one niche. You could go to Kerala. You can do Kerala, the cuisine of the Christians. You can do the cuisine of the Hindus, of the Brahmins of Kerala, of the Muslims of Kerala, of the Jews of Kerala. So many niches within one state. Now go to Tamil Nadu. You could do a Tamilian Brahmin cookbook, or you could do the cookbook of the Chettiyars, the Chettinad cookbook. Then the Christian community of Madras. So within each state of India, you have so many layers of creating niches. Are you from the Northeast? Which states are you from? Tripura, Meghalaya, Assam. Jahan ke hai, wo ek niche hai. Within that, you have the different tribes. Write a cookbook of one tribe. What did they eat? So the niche you find connects you to people of curiosity, people of hunger, people who are social anthropologists who love reading a story and eating the food of different communities. So that's another niche you can service by writing a great cookbook. Other niches are veganism. It's a trend that's here to stay. Is it a healthy trend? Not really. Vegan food is good for the planet. It's not always good for your body. हमारे बदन को चाहिए होता है थोड़ा बहुत जो animal fat वगैरह for processing protein. तो वो एक fad है, but beyond that, there's a lot of vegan food that we can add to our everyday vegetarian diet. So vegan is a trend. Vegetarian certainly. पूरी दुनिया vegetarian बनना चाह रही है. So अगर आप your niche is vegetarian food, it's an incredible niche with long sturdy legs. That walk is a long walk that the world will follow. So get into that bandwagon. Within vegetarianism, you can do vegetarian of Madhya Pradesh, of Uttar Pradesh, of Kashmir, of Punjab, of Sindh. You can do vegetarian of the Jain community. There's so many niches within that one niche. So remember what your niche is. Invest in it. Do it carefully. Do it with love. Share the stories. All these rings I'm wearing, these are stories. I wore them to make a point that in India, from South India to Rajasthan to Gujarat to UP, all of these things are made a little differently. But they tell a story of a state, a region, a people, a community, of a continuity with our past, a connection to our future, but give us joy in this here and now. तो इनके बिना हम लोग कुछ नहीं है. तो अगर आप cookbook पे invest कर रहे हैं, if you're investing in a cookbook, these details matter. Where is the recipe coming from? Why are you putting it? Make your niche the niche of a storyteller. Tomorrow's cookbooks, I can tell you the niche will be that our cookbooks are not just written pages. They are a dynamic conversation where the sizzle happening on the stove. आपके stove side पे आवाज आ रही है भुनने की, छींटों की. आपको almost लग रहा है मेरे को खुशबू भी आ रही है क्योंकि मैं स्क्रीन में देख रहा हूँ बनाने वाले के चेहरे और एक्सप्रेशन देख रहा हूँ. वाह क्या बात है. तो आप उनके साथ खा रहे हैं. ये भी एक niche है. Follow that niche where you're teaching people how to cook by watching you cook. Make it dynamic. Take it on the internet. Make it very real time without it being real. So make that your niche. So the niche you choose is one of a gazillion, but make sure that it's exciting. It's done with authenticity. It's approached with care. It's given all your heft and might. मतलब आपने उसको बस niche साथ चिपकने के लिए नहीं लिया है, आप उसमें अपना वक्त इन्वेस्ट करेंगे, अपनी सोच उसमें डालेंगे, अपनी उसको एक ध्यान और मेडिटेशन बनाएंगे, और फिर जो आप रेसिपीज शेयर करेंगे वो इतनी खूबसूरत, इतनी मजेदार, लजीज होंगी कि दुनिया खाना चाहेगी उन्हें. तो अपने नीश चूज करिए, चूज योर नीश, invest in it, and share it with care. The next thing is, how do you start writing a book? The essence of writing that cookbook comes in an academic rigor. एक उस्ताद की तरह आपको अपनी रेसिपी राइटिंग को अप्रोच करना है. You have to become a guru in your own making. How will I write? You write with precision. एक बहुत साफ हाथ के साथ, सोच के साथ, with very clear, correct instruction and measurement, you start writing your book. You of course put it chapter by chapter. You put together at least, I would say, 20 recipes, and you give them to then friends, and ask 5 different friends to cook those recipes for you, to maybe invite you for dinner after making them, and take photographs. Does the photograph of 5 different friends making those 20 recipes match from one or the other? At least 5 दोस्तों को एक रेसिपी दीजिए कि वो लोग सब वही डिश बनाएं. अगर 5 लोगों ने उसको आइडेंटिकल बना दिया, आपकी रेसिपी काम कर गई. So that's a very important step, that you must test a recipe. Test one time, test a second time, test a third time, test a fourth time, test a fifth time, and a sixth time. एक बारी आप करेंगे, 2 बारी आप करिए, एटलीस्ट 4 या 5 लोगों से और टेस्ट कराइए. अगर हर जगह वो सेम फ्लेवर मिले, सेम जायका मिले, तब आपकी रेसिपी करेक्ट है. That if you and at least 4 other friends test the dish exactly the same way, looking the same, tasting the same, that's when your recipe works and your work is done. And then you write your cookbook. It's called a manuscript. जो आप लिखेंगे, what you write, and what you put together, 20 recipes, 100 recipes, 150 recipes. I would say a minimum of 75 to 100 is a good number. And if you can write 200 plus, people are hungry. People are conjuice. They want to pay less money and get more. More is not always better. ज़्यादा मिलना हमेशा अच्छा नहीं होता. कम मिले पर क्वालिटी मिले, वो ज़्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट है. पर आप एटलीस्ट 75 दीजिए रेसिपीज. 75 to 150 is a good number, and you start with that. And then once you've collected this all material, plus the head notes, plus the chapter introductions, plus the notes of where people can buy ingredients, where they can procure them. जब आपने ये सब लिख दिया है, ये जो manuscript है, आप इसको पढ़िए 2-3 बारी. Read the manuscript that you've completed with all the recipes, head notes, chapter introductions, the content at the back pages for resources for your reader to have. When you've written it all, test the writing. Is it correct? Have you made mistakes? Have you titled all your recipes? Do they look correct? Give it a once over, give it a second once over. I always tell people, come back to a recipe next day, at least 24 hours later. You'll understand if you've forgotten something in the writing, if you're missing something, if there's a glaring error that happened. आप तभी पकड़ते हैं अगर आप थोड़े दिनों बाद उस रेसिपी पे आए. So that's an important gift you give while you are approaching the writing of the cookbook. तो जब manuscript बन जाता है, then you have to take it to an agent and a publisher. This is a big challenge. When I was writing my book, Indian Home Cooking, I've written 3 cookbooks. Indian Home Cooking, American Masala, and Masala Farm. Indian Home Cooking was published when I was 30-year-old. जब मैंने उसको बेचा, I sold it to Clarkson Potter. It was a Random House publishing house. अमेरिका का सबसे famous cookbook publisher. The most noteworthy publisher of American cookbooks, Clarkson Potter, and their editor, Pam Krause. She was the editor-in-chief. So the most powerful woman in publishing of cookbooks bought my book. It was the biggest honor, a dream come true for a young boy who'd left home, had gone so far, 7 समुंदर पार अमेरिका में पहुंचा. ये एक बच्चा ख्वाबों के साथ, जिसके ख्वाबों में कुकिंग नहीं थी, उसने एक किताब सबसे बड़े महत्वपूर्ण पब्लिशर को बेच दी. ये एक बहुत बड़ी पदवी मुझे मिली. ये एक ब्लेसिंग भी थी. It was good luck and so much more. So now I've given her the book. She's bought it, but it wasn't easy. My manuscript was written with care. Not everybody who cooks can write a cookbook. Not everybody who dreams can realize a dream. Sometimes it takes a village. एक पूरा गांव चाहिए होता है एक बच्चे को बड़ा करने में, और उसके पैरों को मजबूत करने के, उसके जो ख्वाब है उनको सच्चाई में लाने के लिए, उनको सिमटने के लिए. It takes a village. It takes a village for a dream to be realized, for somebody to do what they dream of doing and make it into a reality. So what did I do? In my case, I had an agent. So the first thing is find an agent. I found the best agent in America for cookbooks, a woman called Angela Miller. She believed in me. She ate my food. She loved it. She loved how I looked. She loved how I talked. She loved that I was passionate about food. She saw that I was young. So, पब्लिशिंग में लोगों को चाहिए कि लॉन्जेविटी हो. जब आप यंग एक्टर होते पूरी बॉलीवुड आपके पीछे पड़ जाएगा, क्योंकि उनको पता फिर आप उनको 40, 50, 60 साल देंगे अपने करियर में. Similarly for writing. So my publisher saw that he's 27, 28 writing a book. He'll give us many decades of writing. So my agent invested in me. Angela told me, if you want to write a good cookbook, Suvir, you've never written a book. I said, I haven't. You've never written a recipe. I said, I've not. She said, why don't I get you a co-writer? मैं आपको एक राइटर दूंगी जो आपके लिए रेसिपी टेस्टिंग साथ में आपकी करेगा और उसमें आपकी मदद करेगा. I said, जरूर. So then we started looking for that recipe tester and a writer who would write my book with me. Angela said to me, I'll give you some options. And I said to her, options for what? She said, there are all kinds of writers. There are writers who will make your manuscripts solid, but they charge a lot. I said, solid means I'll sell a lot of books. She said, yes. I said, why won't I go with the best? She said, most writers don't want to go with the best because the best costs money. जो अच्छे राइटर हैं वो पैसे लेते हैं आपकी किताब लिखने के लिए आपके साथ. वो इन्वेस्टमेंट आपकी है. तो मेरी जो राइटर थी, स्टेफनी लाइनस उनका नाम था. My co-writer we chose was a woman called Stephanie Linus, the best in America. Nobody better than her. What did she charge me? 50%. अगर मुझे ₹1 मिला, 50 पैसे उनके थे. मेरा ख्वाब, मेरी मेहनत, मेरा खाना, मेरी कहानी. एक दूसरे इंसान को मैंने 50 पैसे पूरे ₹1 के हर बारी दिए. अभी भी देता हूँ. जब मैं किताब बेचता हूँ, अभी भी उनको 50% जाता है. उन्होंने मुझे क्या दिया? एक तोहफा जिंदगी भर के लिए दिया कि एक ऐसी हिंदुस्तानी किताब बनी अमेरिका में जो सारी पुरानी किताबों को लोगों को उसने भुला दिया. क्योंकि इस किताब में हर रेसिपी काम करी, हर फोटोग्राफ को मैच करी. जो लोगों ने खाना खाया वो मजा एक था. टेस्ट वाज करेक्ट. What Stephanie gave me by charging 50% of every dollar I earned was the gift of consistency, correct testing, incredible writing of a recipe in formats that were clear, language that was precise, and made me a book called Indian Home Cooking. That is the largest selling Indian cookbook published in America that has sold almost over a few 100,000 copies. Most cookbooks sell 10 or 20,000 copies at a success. मैंने सैकड़ों हजार बेच दी हैं. तो स्टेफनी की गिफ्ट थी. मैं अपने आप को नहीं कहता वाह वाह मैंने कितना अच्छा किया. मेरी एजेंट, मेरी को राइटर, उन्होंने इक्वली मेरी जितनी मेहनत करी, तो उनको मैं क्रेडिट देता हूँ. फाइंड दैट एजेंट हु टीचेस यू टू बी स्मार्ट. तो ऐसा एजेंट, लिटरेरी एजेंट ढूंढिए जो आपको अपना एक बेटर वर्जन बनाए. फाइंड अ लिटरेरी एजेंट हु टीचेस यू टू बी अ बेटर वर्जन ऑफ योरसेल्फ, who makes you joggle your mind, think smarter, who makes you give away a little money, but in the end, make your cookbook a better cookbook. And do that as a gift for yourself. Now you have an agent. Now what will you do? Now you have to go sell the book. Who buys a cookbook? A publisher. There are many publishers. Go to Fakir Chandan Sons, Bahari Sons, or another amazing cookbook book store in your city, and go through the cookbook aisles. Find 10 books that are to you seem the best cookbooks you've seen. एक बारी आप उनको देखेंगे, उनके जो स्पाइन होती है किताब का, वो जो स्पाइन होता है जिसको आप ऐसे देखते हैं, उस पर आप देखिए क्या नाम है पब्लिशर का. उन पब्लिशर्स के ऊपर थोड़ा गूगल सर्च कीजिए कि उनकी रेपुटेशन क्या है, उनके और ऑथर्स कौन है. Do that homework. So once you have 10 or 20 cookbooks you found as the best cookbooks you see who the common publishers are. Oftentimes 2 or 3 publishers would have published 20 cookbooks. Those are the best publishers. Now tell your agent, these are the publishing houses I like, and their cookbook I want to have as my cookbook. So then your agent knows what publisher you want. Is it Rupa? Is it somebody else? It's for you and your agent to find your perfect partner. There are many kinds of publishers. There are publishers who publish a book, but that book is not always sold with that much pride with them. छोटा publisher चाहिए, बड़ा publisher चाहिए. Do you want a small publisher, big publisher? Do you want a publisher who will be married to you for life, or a publisher who just buys a book and lets it sleep? So you have to think. There are publishing houses that give you a lot of money to write a book, but then once you've written, वो books होती है उनके go down में. So you have to find a publisher that keeps your book alive, that makes it a perennial, that makes it leaves it in print for perpetuity, that they keep printing it again and again, so that you always have it in all bookstores. That's the publisher you want. You want a publisher who's proud to have you as an author, who's investing money in you, who will tour you, who will travel you far and wide to all the literary festivals, to different cooking festivals, different melas where books are sold. You want to be everywhere. So find a publisher who will get behind you. ऐसा publisher ढूंढिए जो आपसे जुड़ जाए और आपकी कहानी, आपकी किताब और आपके विचार को साथ साथ अपने साथ बेचते हैं. तो उनको ढूंढिए. Next thing, find a publisher that knows how to market your book. So we've approached how to approach a publisher with your draft. It's the agent's job. It has to come with a proposal. The proposal has to have a tippany of your book, has to have a bio of you, a sexy photograph, some beautiful sexy photographs of your food. And once they say yes, 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 then you go with the rest of the photography. तो ये तो हो गई. अब आपने कैसे अपने एजेंट के साथ को पब्लिशर पे आप ले आए. पब्लिशर ने आप खरीद ली. अब उसका पब्लिश प्रमोटर मार्केट कैसे करेंगे? A lot of good publishers don't publish a book in a month or 2 months or 3 months. They give you 6 months to a year to write that manuscript, to invest in it, to take beautiful photographs, to do a good job with it. तो ऐसा पब्लिशर ढूंढिए जो आप पे इन्वेस्ट करे, कुकबुक पे इन्वेस्ट करे, वक्त आपको दे और आपको वो रिस्पेक्ट दे that you can keep writing it correctly. Now that you've written it, it's all about promotion and marketing. Promotion and marketing are the key, because you can have the best kept secret. You don't want a book that is so amazing, but nobody is talking about, nobody is reviewing in the newspapers, no bloggers are putting a word about it, nobody is talking about it in YouTube. वो किताब सबसे बढ़िया कहानी जो किसने कभी सुनी नहीं. So you have to find a publisher that will travel you. You want to be in all the top writing forums, in cooking forums, food festivals, literary festivals, in local melas around the country. Find a publisher who will give you money to do that. And then, of course, there's social media. Creating an Instagram account and a YouTube page are very good ways of doing it. Today's people live in them, and it's the way of selling a story. Your Instagram handle, your YouTube channel, if you have one, are where you sell your story. You sell your storytelling. You sell your recipe. You sell your book. But most of all, you sell the sizzle, the masala of your life, your inheritance from your family, the heritage of your community, the nuance of your culture, and the life and breath of your nation and people. This has to come through. If your Instagram page is all about me, कोई आपको नहीं सुन रहा. आपको मीमी के बीच में ये भी डालना है कि मैंने आज क्या किया, मैंने ऐसा खाना क्यों खाया, उसमें क्या मजा मुझे किस इंग्रेडिएंट पे आया, उसके रंग सुंदर था, उसका टेम्परेचर अच्छा था, उसका टेक्सचर ठीक था, उसकी जो कहानी थी किसी की दादी की सास ने उनकी माँ से सीख के उनको आज बनाया. Those connections, the links, वो जैसे एक हार के एक मोती उसके साथ सोना मिल रहा है, उसके साथ हीरा, उसके साथ वो क्या कहते हैं पन्ना, ये लिंक्स है रेसिपी के, कहानी के, पन्ने के. And these you have to share in your Instagram page and YouTube handle. When you do that with pride, when you do that in detail, when you do it on a rhythm, people come to an Instagram handle or a YouTube channel as a rhythm. Maybe every Monday, 20 followers will come every Monday, another 20 or 30 will come on a Tuesday, 50 may come on Wednesday, 75 every Thursday. You have to see it. What is the algorithm? When are people coming to you? Why are they coming to you? You have to do that research. If you put a recipe and only 30 people show up, and then you put another recipe and 500 show up, you have to understand मैंने क्या different करा कि एक में 30 लोग आए, तीसरी में 500 लोग आ गए. You have to think, what did I do differently that on Monday 30 people showed up for my post and on Thursday 500? What did I do different? Did I take a photograph in a more appealing manner in one Instagram post? Was my content more approachable? Was I sounding more relatable? Was I sounding generous? आप सोचते आपने लिख दिया कुछ, आपने कड़क लिखा या प्यार से लिखा, आपने दूसरों की सोच सोच के लिखा या आपने उनको थप्पड़ मारने के लिए लिखा? All of that matters. Did you write with an approachable voice that people can appreciate, understand, think as their own, and embrace and celebrate for being generous? That voice brings more people to the party. So think of that when you're making a post. Keep a weekly rhythm. It's very important to keep adding content on a weekly basis. You can't go to sleep कि अभी 10 रेसिपी दे दी फिर अगले 3 हफ्ते में सो जाऊंगा. इंटरनेट में वो थप्पड़ ऐसा पड़ता है कि people will not come back. So keep a healthy rhythm. The promotion and the marketing are the heart and soul of a recipe. Once you've invested in a book, that's the most important part. And that has to be worked out by you, your storytelling, your appearance, your smile, your tears, your sharing a culture and a heritage. You have to do all of it. अगर आप Instagram पे चले गए फिर आपकी कहानी आपकी जिंदगी सारी Instagram बन जाती है. वो आपको समझना है that your life is taken over by Instagram. And when you do that and you do that successfully, there's no better marketing. And then you have to perhaps think of how you can go on the road and do cooking classes and do all kinds of other promotions that make your book palpably more interesting to people. So remember that. And so writing a cookbook is a whole world unto itself, a world where a memory, a culture, a people, a society, and a world of flavors come as a confluence. अभी क्या हो रहा है हिंदुस्तान में? कुंभ मेला. तो वो जो कुंभ मेला है वो 3 नदियों की मीटिंग है. एक रेसिपी, मजहब, जायका, इंसान और इंसानियत और एक टेबल पे बैठ के खाना खाने की कहानी है. A recipe is the meeting of minds, of tradition, of taste, of a flavor of a moment, and a people and a nation's history, lore, and legend. When you can tie them all up together and create not only a recipe but a story that touches people's hearts, tickles their minds, and gives them something to hold on to, cook, and share with friends and family. It's then that recipe is not just a recipe. It's a way of approaching life with deliciousness that moves minds, bodies, and souls. जब आप एक वो रेसिपी डेवलप कर लेंगे और लिख लेंगे जिससे लोग मिलके खा सकते हैं, बातें कर सकते हैं, सपने देख सकते हैं, जायका को सेलिब्रेट कर सकते हैं, वो आपको दुआएं देंगे, आपके पन्नों से बार बार कुक करेंगे और आपको इज्जत वो देंगे जो आप जो किताब लिखेंगे रेसिपी कुकबुक बार बार वो खरीदेंगे. तो आप ऐसी कुकबुक लिखिए जिसमें धमाका भी हो पर लॉट्स ऑफ सब्सटेंस भी हो, जिसमें एक कंट्री का इतिहास, उसकी लोगों की वजूद, सब कुछ है. So just don't write a recipe book. Write a book with gravitas, with lots of history, lots of fun anecdotes that are personal but are also globally accepted and celebrated. That is called a cookbook that has legs to stand on, जो अपने पैरों पे खड़ी हो सकती है आज, कल, and forever. And that's what a cookbook is all about. So when you go to write a cookbook, think, create, test again, click beautiful photographs, write your book, take it to a great agent, go to an amazing publisher, make sure they travel you, they put you on tour, they market your book, they promote it for you, and most of all, that you create a social media profile that's strong, that's bullish, that's investing in yourself on a repeated rhythmic basis, not just one day, but every day of the week. Documents for people your journey, gives them a taste of your flavors, and connects them to your mind, to your social history, your nation's history, and what you're hungry for. That's the recipe to a cookbook that's great and to a life well lived. Make it real, make it authentic, make it tasty and full of masala. That's writing a cookbook.